What happens when the struggles that should break you actually shape your purpose? Today on The Good Influencers, we're talking with Wendy Henson, counselor, community leader, and city council member. From losing loved ones to starting over as a single parent, Wendy has walked through some of life's hardest seasons. And out of it, she founded Centerton Cares, a nonprofit that's changing lives in Northwest Arkansas. In this episode, she shares her powerful story of resilience, faith, and what it truly means to be a good influencer. All right, Wendy, appreciate you coming in. Again, I know you've got a pretty powerful story. And why don't you start off telling us a little bit about where you grew up and how you grew up and some of the early childhood or early life experiences that you have had?
Well, thank you for having me. I can't say that this is fairly common in this area these days, but I actually grew up in Northwest Arkansas, specifically in Bentonville, Bella Vista area. At the age of 2, I was born in Springdale, and so youngest of 6. And so we moved to Bella Vista when I was 2 years old, and we lived there until I was about 10. My mom started working for Walmart at the Bentonville Walmart store in 1979. And so a biggest part of my childhood was Walmart. I mean, it was still fairly a small company. We were very connected to the people in the store, and my family made a lot of friends with, people that my mom worked with. My dad was a photographer, and he also worked as a correction officer for the Springdale Police Department. So a big part of my childhood was just kind of following them around, essentially. And being the youngest of 6, I learned a lot. I wouldn't say that our home was steady all the time. There was some things going on in our home that just weren't okay. But that adversity really kind of helped me recognize that there are people in the world who are also dealing with the same things. And so it wasn't until, I was someone who was very early on in life. I got connected to church. We had a neighbor friend that took us all to church, all the kids. My parents weren't in church at the time. And so from that, church really was, I would say, the foundation of how I became who I am today. But along the way, we all go through different challenges and questions, especially in, I would say, adolescence is where we kind of question, does God really exist? And so, I went through that just like most people. The good thing is that he does exist. And so that helps me and kind of spearheaded a lot of things in my life. I'm not free from mistakes, but early, in my high school years, I always just wanted to help people. I mean, it was just always something I did. I wanted to make people feel good. We, lived in a fairly middle-class home. My parents struggled, obviously, with 6 kids, but our income was about middle class. I didn't always feel like I belonged. I felt judged a lot. I felt like I had to, try to prove myself growing up. And I guess it was, I had my own children, went through, different situations with relationships that weren't healthy. And I'm currently married, wonderful husband. It took a little bit to find the prince, right? So I had to kiss a few frogs, I guess. But I have a good marriage, and a lot of it comes from just recognizing my own value and that adversity. I've been through. I would say in the last 5 to 6 years, it's probably been the most. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's been
Transformative.
a lot of transformation in my life, but more of restoration of becoming who I feel like I was meant to be, who I was called to be. There was a period of time over the course of a few years where, I went back to school back in 2013, wanted to get my degree. I was involved in Celebrate Recovery in Rogers, and God placed it on my heart that there are a lot of people that are struggling, especially teenagers, who are going through a lot of adult problems. And it placed on my heart that, this is the time for you to become a counselor. And so that's what I did. I went back to school.
Where were you living at this time?
At that time, I was actually living here in Northwest Arkansas. I was going to Liberty University. I got enrolled in that program and pursued my bachelor's degree in behavioral science and religion, and had an interdisciplinary studies degree when I finished. And then I finished that in 2017. And, along the way, there had been, different situations in my family where my daughter's dad, he had been diagnosed with cancer. We were living in Virginia. We were a military family, and his cancer,
And sorry, what year was this that he was?
he passed away in 2015 when my daughter was 13 years old. And so we had just moved back from Virginia after a pretty awful divorce I went through. And so I guess that's kind of where everything started for me, where the transformation started, because I felt like in those moments of, learning about God more, obviously getting a religious degree, I had a lot of time in scripture. And, along the way, my dad had passed away in 2013 from cancer. My ex-husband had been going through cancer diagnosis, and, we talked earlier about addiction, and he was an alcoholic. And so that was a really hard time for me. And that was my first marriage. So I was very young. And so, to have that conversation with my daughter later on, he overcame that. And that was wonderful. But shortly after, he was diagnosed with cancer. And so we went through that journey. I moved back, went through that divorce in 2015, not from him, from my second marriage. And I'm really being vulnerable here because not a lot of people know my true story. So, but it's changed my life because I recognized in a lot of that was I had a voice too, and that addiction can be really hard on children and can be hard on the person who has the addiction.
So what about that adversity brought that voice out in you?
I think, protecting my kids, at the time I had 3 kids, and it was in my second marriage, we didn't have any kids together. And so I became kind of a mama bear and recognizing that we all fall short, right? We all struggle in life and, going to school. I went back to school because I wanted to kind of prove that I could. And I think going back to school also helped me recognize that that's something no one could take away from me or take credit for. There were a lot of times in my life where people had taken credit for things that I had done. And that was a really hard battle for me to understand. And so I guess I found my voice in the sense of advocating for my kids, of keeping them safe, of trying to be a good example to them. And when I went through that divorce, my daughter had about 8 months with her dad before he passed away. But the blessing is that he overcame his addiction. The sad part was that, ultimately those decisions led to some health issues, and it took his life, and it took her father away from her. She's a strong 23 years old now. I'm pretty proud of my kids. Like, they've gone through a lot, things that, kids shouldn't have to go through, just, different things at school and in relationships they've had, but they've overcome a lot. And so, but, I think as parents, we have to try to set the best example we could. And at the time, I thought I was doing the best I could to try to, take care of them and meet their needs. And so from there, so that was 2015. I went back to work when we moved in with my mom for a little bit. And then I had to
And
live.
that was to Centerton? Is that what
Yeah, she lived in Centerton. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so I went back to work because, of course, for a little bit I didn't work. And so when we lived in Virginia, so I moved back and went back to work, and I applied for a home through Habitat for Humanity. And from there, I received the green light that we were approved and that we were going to build our own house. And so I was pretty excited about it. The kids were excited, and they chose Centerton. I was able to choose Centerton, and they had space for us there. And so I helped my neighbor build his house, and that was my sweat equity. And then the spring of 2017, we started building my house, and by June we had the house. And that December I graduated with my bachelor's degree.
So having that house, what did that do for you and for your kids?
Well, for one, I was a student, so working part-time, I was able to qualify for the Habitat home. There's kind of a misconception that Habitat homes are free. It was not free. It took a lot of work and a lot of time to build, but then you have a mortgage after, but they make it to where you can afford to pay that mortgage, own a home, and it really gets people out of poverty in a sense. We were, at the time, we were on food stamps. We were, just trying to get our feet back from underneath us and moving back. And it really, I would say that was kind of the foundation for what was to come. And along the way, through the death of my ex-husband, my dad, my grandmother died a year before my dad. So it was just like death after death after death. And And that's a lot, and trying to go to school and be a single parent and trying to, kind of keep the bills going. And so it was a big challenge. And it was in 2017 that my mom was first diagnosed with cancer. And that was a hard pill to swallow. She was a rock for our family. She took care of all of us. And I'll try not to get emotional, but when I talk about her, there's just so much strength in who she was and the example that she set for her family. She was a strong Christian woman. She was very determined and very confident. And so I learned a lot of that from her. And so she beat the cancer initially, and 2 years later, it came back. My brother dealt with brain tumors over the years, cancer, benign, back and forth for 20 plus years. Never married, no kids. And that was a challenge because his tumor came back in February of 2019. And then my mom was re-diagnosed with lung cancer again in 2019 in May.
Wow.
I was in grad school. So I started back in grad school in 2018, doing pretty good. Everything's going great. And then, we found out mom's sick. And that hurt me a lot. That was hard. And, a lot of people in that moment would have questioned God and believed, well, God's not real. Why would he let someone hurt that much? Why would she have lung cancer? She's never smoked. My dad smoked for many years. And of course, back in the day, parents smoked in the home. We had ashtrays all over the house,
So how did you work through those thoughts and feelings?
Well, I was in grad school to be a counselor, and I had extremely good professors. I had a great program. I had a lot of support from, friends and family, and, my best friend, she was a great support for me. But I would give a lot of the credit to this professor. His name was Dr. Kappa. And I remember once a year, we had to go to Colorado for our residency. And it was my last residency. What I thought it was going to be my last residency. So I went to Colorado, and I'm sitting in the lectures. It's on a Friday morning. I'm sitting in lectures, and my mom tries to call me, and she knew I was going to be in lectures. So I couldn't figure out what she would be calling for. And I was like, Mom, we're in lectures. She's like, we need to talk. I didn't want to make that phone call.
Yeah.
I'm sitting at this round table. Remember the shoes I had on? I get up to go call her, and I fall down. Everybody's looking at me. Is she okay? And I get up and I go out there, and she tells me the cancer is found in my brain and her adrenal gland. So it's spreading. I have 3 more days of residency in Colorado. My kids are at home, and I feel like I'm sitting on an island. I'm surrounded by Christian people becoming Christian counselors. And I just felt so isolated and so alone. And I had to compose myself, because lectures were going on, and they had taken a break. And so I'd come back to the room, this big room, at the school, and I ran into someone who I'd been in class with, and we did some kind of, different activities together. So we had some connection, and I went to him and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to be here. I want to go home, and he said, Wendy, you have to push through. You have to, your mama wants you to do that. And she told me, she's like, hey, sorry, I'm giving you this information, but I wanted you to know. And it took a lot for me to be able to even get to that residency. My car broke down. I had to rent a car. It was the whole thing. So I was feeling great anyway. And then that afternoon, I fell again, walking from that building to the dorm room where I was staying. And it occurred to me that there's been times in my life where I have to remove things if things become too much. So immediately, sometimes it's people, sometimes it's, sometimes it's just taking things off of my plate and isolating myself. But I recognized in that moment I couldn't do that. I'm a counselor. I'm supposed to start internships soon. I'm supposed to be helping people. And so I decided to not start internship that year. I came back home after that, and I decided to take some of the other courses I needed to take. And then that spring semester, I spent, the rest of that year helping my mom. I finished out that summer semester, and then I took a couple classes in the fall. And then I took spring semester off. And that was a turning point for me because my brother had gotten worse. He was put into hospice. My mom was put into hospice. And this is 2019. So this is right before COVID takes place.
So brother and mom are in hospice at the same time.
Mom they were both in hospice, but not, he was inpatient hospice for a bit. He was a, pretty heavy-set guy. He had a lot of seizures, medications were causing the weight gain and stuff. So we had a few, and it's kind of a big circle moment because we have such a wonderful fire department in Centerton. My brother would get lodged in the bathroom and he'd fall down. And he had what they call encephalitis. So he would have brain fluid build up in his brain. And so he had to have shunts put in. And he went through 7 operations that spring of 2019 to try to get the right shunt, so where it would drain the brain fluid into his body. And so the Centerton Fire Department would come out and they would come and they would help him. No questions asked, no money asked for. They would help him get up. And sometimes they'd have to take the door off. But it got to the point, and he was living with my mom at the time. So it got to the point where it was just too much. And so they put him in hospice at Circle of Life in Bentonville for a while. And then he kind of didn't qualify for hospice because he kind of come in and out of, where he was at. They knew there was no treatment for him. And so they put him in kind of a nursing home type place. He was still considered hospice, but he had more time, than some patients that can. And so in the spring I guess it's more of like the winter part, January-ish, they put him in that place and he stayed there until March. He passed away in March of 2020. In the meantime, my mom was also placed in hospice. She was having some trouble. She would swell up all over her arms. It was just so hard. And of course, they closed the schools down, and I was working for Bentonville School District at the time. And I'd taken a leave of absence intermittently to help Mom. And I just lived a few blocks away. So it was really good. My daughter was older, so she would take care of the boys, and I would go to her house and help her out. And she slowly declined. She's really struggled. And so I would help with medication, giving her baths, different things like that. But with COVID, it was really hard because she was compromised. And so I couldn't go to different places to get her medical supplies or whatever. The nurses from Circle of Life didn't come as often because they didn't want to, create this wave of, potentially causing COVID to spread. And so they reduced how much they came. So I became a hospice nurse, essentially. I took care of her. And so he died March 25th of 2020, and she died 3 weeks later. So you asked me earlier, what was the turning point for me? And it was a moment of me and God had to have a conversation. And that conversation was, Wendy, you can't allow yourself to go into this deep depression. It shook my entire world. She was my rock. She was the person I would go to when people were mean to me. She was a person that I went to when I just needed support or I needed sometimes tough love. And it was, taking care of her, watching her breathing towards the last few weeks of her life. Family, working, coming in and out, but I was there constantly with her. And to watch your parent suffer so miserably because she struggled with pain, and we were having trouble getting help with her pain, keeping her pain managed. And I had to advocate for her quite a bit. And it really changed my relationship with that hospice place because I had a lot of resentment because it wasn't a burden I should be carrying. It's supposed to be that when you're in hospice, it's the quality of care. You're supposed to make them feel comfortable, and she wasn't comfortable. And so it wasn't a challenge with God. It was a challenge with the world. God was taking care of her needs and my needs, except for she was in pain, and there was nothing I could do. I didn't have any kind of power over her. My sister had that, and she lived, a couple hours away. And so, but I knew that I couldn't be depressed. A month after my mom's diagnosis, I met my husband, and he was the constant for me. He was a big support. He was there for me. He was a police officer. And so on his days off, he would come and sit with me and keep me company. When he'd get off his shift, he'd come at night. If he worked nights, he'd come before his shift. And, so that was a big support as well. And he'd check on the kids, And I don't know where I would have been. I know that was God placing him in my life at the right time, as that was literally almost to the day, a month after her diagnosis. But I knew that I couldn't continue on the path that I was on. So I decided I wanted to help people. that's just my heart is, I see all these people hurting. I see, on social media, like all these people are looking for help and having trouble figuring out what's open. How do we get masks? How do we get gloves? How do we get whatever? And it was hard for me to find a blood pressure cuff for my mom. I mean, stores were out of toilet paper. I'm sure you remember the toilet paper crisis.
Yeah.
And so I said, we've got to support people around us. We have to take care of our neighbors. And so I created a Facebook group in the midst of all this, trying to, and this was, before she passed away. It actually started just about a week before my brother died. I started a Facebook group and I started putting, when my Habitat house was built, there was a little box out front of my house that was supposed to be a book library that was put in there by one of the students at one of the local schools. And it never really came to be at that. And so it kind of, with the weather and things, it was just kind of, so we repurposed it. At the time, he was my boyfriend. So we repurposed it and I started putting food in there, non-perishable items to help people out and trying to find a way to help people. And so I did that. And then I started a Facebook group. So someone had posted on another group like, hey, we need something in our community. And I was like, I'll do it, And so I did. And we went from that, probably the community support. There was a lady that I met through the page who ended up becoming the godsend because, like I said, we weren't getting help with the nursing from the hospice, and my mom needed to be turned. She was just laying on her back. She was getting bed sores. And this lady by the name of Lena, she came over. She was a nurse. She was a medical assistant for a doctor's office. I believe that was what she was called. And she said, I'll come help. Because I was like, I don't know what to do. She's in pain and I'm afraid to touch her, And she came over and she bathed her and she turned her and she came over a couple of times before Mom died. And it just so happens that she knew someone who knew my sister and they somehow crossed paths at one point. It was just a God thing. And so all these things started happening. And there's a lady by the name of Susan Ratliff that lives in the Centerton. She was one of the very first members of Centerton Cares. And she started picking up hot food and taking it to delivering in the family's home so they could have food from a restaurant, get tired of eating the same thing over and over. We had people, donating time to go mow people's yards because they didn't want to leave their house or they couldn't because they were sick. We did a parade for a boy who had immune deficiency. And so from that point on, things started coming, the community started coming together. They were taking care of the needs of each other. And what started as a Facebook group turned into a movement, essentially. Our little food pantry continued to be stocked. And actually, the day of my mom's memorial, my son's school, Creekside Elementary, or middle school, the principal contacted me and said, hey, we're going to do a food drive to help your little pantry. And they did. And they showed up and they filled that thing as full as they could fill it. We had bought a plastic storage container and we put it next to the pantry because we were getting so many donations because of what our family was going through with my mom. So they showed up and they filled it up so much that it was, when I got home from the memorial service, it was leaning, almost falling over. And that is what true community is. And I grew up where I could go next door and get eggs from a neighbor. I don't know if you remember that, but those were things that I remembered that I loved because I knew that my neighbors would take care of me. I trusted them, and we kind of gotten away from that. And so Centerton Cares became a nonprofit the following year. And we celebrated 4 years this year as a nonprofit.
So it feels like this Centerton Cares nonprofit that you have developed, it was a long journey. It was a long path. It was a journey of adversity and people stepping in to help you. And it seemed like it all kind of came together at the right time. And so I wanted to touch on people and resources. It seems like every adversity, every moment that you ran into an issue, you had someone there to help you, whether it was your mom, whether it was Habitat for Humanity, whether it was your soon-to-be husband, whether it was this lady that would come to help your mom. It seems like it was people and resources that were provided to you as you were dealing with this adversity. How did that affect your desire to give and to provide because you had been provided for so much.
That's 100% why I do what I do now. I'm so in love with the community that I live in because they stepped up for me in a moment of weakness, in a moment of vulnerability, in a moment of not even knowing who I was. And no one knew me until that group was started. And even to this day, there are families upon families upon families that are impacted by the goodness of people. We live in a world that is, I would say, tumultuous. We have some hate, we have some bitterness going on, we have hunger, we have crime. There's so many things that we can focus on. And for me, I focused on the good. I wanted to focus on the goodness of people, and it was those people who saved me from depression. I finished college and got my master's degree at the end of, it all runs together now, the end of 21. I graduated, no, it's the end of 21, because I started my internship, and I was asked to run for mayor. And I thought, wow, these people are crazy. I don't know anything about being a mayor, in the moment.
So real quick, so the
Sure.
community, you put together this Facebook group. You'd kind of united the community in a to serve each other, essentially. And so based off of that group, out came Centerton Cares, your nonprofit. And because the community observed your desire to serve, they suggested that you run for mayor. Is that kind of how that happened?
I think so. I mean, I developed a lot of relationships. I just finished my degree, and it was the spring of 22 when I literally walked, in my graduation, but I finished classes the end of 21. And I think they saw a need. They saw a need for some people, felt that we needed, someone who had passion and compassion in the community, and someone that was serving, and someone that was doing it for no benefit other than to see people's lives changed. And scripture tells us that, like when Moses in the burning bush, I reflect on that every single time that I'm asked by anyone to do anything, and then I pray about it. And then I feel, okay, God, are you telling me yes or no? Because I get my, all of that from him. I had a dream one night, and it was just a stirring dream where God says, Wendy, I want you to run for mayor. And I'm like, wait, I thought I was supposed to be a counselor. Like, what's going on here? And he said, I don't expect you to win. I just want you to run. And everything from that point on, it was a very challenging time for me. If you look back at that race, I was one of 5, and I wouldn't say it was the most positive election time.
So real quick, so you
Sure.
had that dream. Did you wake up the next morning and be like, okay, we're doing this?
I actually had that dream, and I went back to sleep like, okay, this is just a nightmare, kind of.
Right.
You're feeling like this can't be real, because I never really had a moment where I felt like God speaking to me that clearly. And I was always taught you have to be obedient. You have to have faith and mustard seed. But more so, just like Moses in the burning bush, send someone else. Like, this is, I have no idea, but it was a moment of obedience for me. And I didn't wake up the next morning saying that. I started calling friends and people I was close to, saying, hey, what do you think about this? And telling about my dream and stuff. And it just became a constant, to the point where I had like this pain in my chest, that I was struggling with this decision. And I finally said, okay, God, I will give it to you. I will do exactly what you're asking me to do, not knowing what the outcome was going to be and doing my best along the way. And I didn't win, and that's okay. But I did win a lot of relationships. I did see the loyalty in people and the compassion that people have for me. And really, honestly, like, people believed in me. People were proud of me. And for the longest time, being the youngest of 6, you didn't always hear those words, So you try to do your best in life and hope that you're making the right decisions. And I learned and I grew. And, someone recently said to me, you've been through a lot of adversity in your life, and there's so much more to my story. This is just small pieces of it, but they saw me as someone who doesn't give up. I don't give up, and I don't quit. And I've noticed a pattern of that over my life. But I also speak to honesty and integrity. And I think that's what people saw in me, was that I tried to stay true to who I am in all aspects of my life, at home and out in the community. And I really do love and care for people, even those that may not like me. I try to take care of, we've had situations where people have said some not so nice things to me. But if that person came to me and said, "Hey, I'm struggling and I need food," I'll be the first to stand at their door and give them food, because it's not about me, and I think that's what maybe has caused people to believe in me. And then I learned through that I also needed to believe in me. And it was taking that moment of defeat, in a sense, that I could have just gone under the shadow and just disappeared into, a little corner. But I also saw a need for, a community where we support our seniors, we support families, we support everyone. It's not just about, the people that need a swimming pool. It's about the seniors that are shut in and need a place to go and connect.
So you currently have Centerton Cares. What is the mission of Centerton Cares? I know you've mentioned food, you've mentioned the seniors. What's its overall mission?
And the seniors essentially became something completely opposite, or not opposite, but separate from Centerton Cares. The mission of Centerton Cares is to bring unity to the community. And our mission is to provide the needs and be the facilitator between people in the community that want to serve their neighbor, but not sure how. So we connect. So we have there's 6 food pantries in the community, 5 of them we own. So we've developed more little free food pantries throughout the community that anybody's welcome to. We have people from the neighboring communities that come to Centerton, and they feed their families from that. And so we offer that. We offer a Christmas program, which is similar to the Angel Tree, where people in our community actually adopt kids for Christmas, the family, and they provide Christmas gifts to their neighbor, not knowing who their neighbor is. We do a Thanksgiving program. We do the annual Easter egg hunt. And we also, help with different needs. We've also done several fundraisers for families who've had significant situations that are emergencies, like death in the family. It was tragic, house fires, medical issues where, they weren't expecting it and they're without. So we, as a board, I say as a board, I'm not on the board, I'm the executive director, but the board of directors and I would go through those applications, and then we do the lemon blueberry bread is one of the biggest parts of our bake sales that we do, and that's our biggest fundraiser that we do. And I started making lemon blueberry bread, and I probably make 80 to 90 loaves every time we have one of those, because they're so popular. And so it's a great feeling to give yourself. And I think at the end of the day, the healing that I've experienced and the ability to graduate with honors and to finish school was because of this city I live in. That is the reason I am who I am today. There's a lot of things that kind of created who I am today, but I was able to find myself and see myself better because I was able to give up myself and serve others. And that is why I do everything that I do.
That's pretty powerful. I don't know a lot of stories where people credit their community, their city, their town for changing their life. I think that speaks a lot to the community.
And there's a lot of people that were a part of that. I've had so many that have come into my life. I can think of 3 or 4 women right now that are about my mom's age, or what would have been my mom's age, who have taken me under their wing and treated me like a daughter. And I call some of them mom. And those are the kind of relationships that I've built. So I've been very passionate about different things in the community. And so, starting the senior center, I do that 2 days a week as volunteer, and I'm part of the steering committee. But I want to reiterate the importance of understanding I couldn't do this alone. There is absolutely no way I could have done this by myself. But I planted a seed, and I've been continuing to be able to plant those seeds. And having the people in the community support me through that has been what has created the change in the community.
So what are Centerton Care's greatest needs?
We do see a lot of food insecurity in Centerton. A lot of families, I would say, one of the things that we're not able to do is help people with their bills. There's 2 pieces to that. We are a nonprofit, and nonprofits, we are with all the other nonprofits in Northwest Arkansas who would love donations. We're not always the recipient of those donations. So we work within the confines of our budget. And so we do what we can. So we have limited resources. So being able to help with utility bills and things like that is just not something we're able to do. So we do try to refer them to other organizations that do those things. Food insecurity is a big one. We would love to be able to create more programs, but a lot of that comes from the financial piece. Unfortunately, we all have to. Money is part of what makes the world go round, I guess.
So if somebody really wanted to help with Centerton Cares, they can make a financial donation, correct?
And it's a tax-free donation because we are a 501c3.
And how do they go about doing that?
CentertonCares.org is our website, and you can go there and make donations there. You can write a check. I mean, everybody knows where I live, and that address is 368 North B Street. You can send a check to us. You can reach out to me individually.
We'll put your contact information in the shout outs too, so people know how to find you.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Centerton Cares. That's kind of one component of your, shall I say, ministry.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I feel like it started that way. We do not say that we're a Christian organization, but
right, yeah.
Everyone in our board and many of the community are Christian, and so we do give credit to God for a lot of the work He's done and for the blessings that we have in our community. And there's so many. Sometimes we lose sight of that because we're unhappy about different things, but that's what I love to go back to, is just seeing people just serving. Just this morning, someone put on that they had 3 or 4 inflatable pools and they were putting one in the pantry. And if anybody needs one for their kids because it's hot outside, it's little things like that, and it's recognizing needs outside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the healing happens for everyone, is when we take a step outside of ourselves. So
you have Centerton Cares. It sounds like you've got a board. It's a strong organization. There's financial needs. People can make a donation if they feel moved to do so. Then it sounds like you also have an organization that works with the seniors. Is that a formal organization? Is it part of Centerton Cares? Tell us maybe more about that.
No, so it's more of like a civic group. We do meet in the community room at the old city hall twice a week. There is a group of us that are steering committee. We create a schedule and we have different speakers that come in, but we're kind of self-funded as well. Recently, and I'll have to give kudos to Apex Network in Centerton. Lisa Davis, she works for them, and she put together a senior expo this year. And that was a huge fundraiser that helped the senior citizens, because we were actually paying out of our pocket, some of the seniors and ourselves, for coffee and different things like that, and for activities that we did. And so we want to try to keep the seniors from having to, because they're all on fixed income, and keep them from having to be out of pocket. So she did that fundraiser and kind of put that together, and we were able to get a good amount of money to help us. My dream is that, the senior center becomes a part of the city. I mean, that's what my aspiration is. Not in my control, whether that happens or not, but that's my goal, is so that they can be an ample part of what we do and be funded and to have a place to go and connect, because they are taxpayers just as much as anyone else, and they deserve to have space just like we have a community center coming. And so that is a wish, not, like I said, maybe not something that will happen, but something certainly we would love to. We're not a nonprofit. Being a nonprofit would be really hard because some of the people on the committee are seniors. And so it's a big ask to ask them to take on a nonprofit, when they've worked their whole lives trying to, take care of their families. And now it's the time where they get to enjoy sleeping in and all the things. And so I'm gracious to have 3 others that help me kind of lead the group. But that's kind of the goal for that group, is to become more of a formal entity of the city. And I speak for myself in that. I'm not speaking for anyone else, but we're gracious to the city for allowing us to use the space.
So speaking of the city, I know you have some involvement with the city. Could you talk briefly about that?
Yeah. So this last year, once again, I was asked and I prayed to run for city council, and I won the election. Came to a runoff, and there was 4 of us in that election. And I would say, out of between the mayor election and this election, this was a lot more calm, more respectful, I would say, for the most part. So I took office in January, and so I've been on the council for almost 8 months now, and I've learned so much. There is a kind of training that you go through with Municipal League, and I've completed level 2 certification, which I don't even know how many hours that equates to, but I kind of sprinkled it in between. And I went back to school just in May, working on my doctorate in public administration. I've had several church leaders that have come to me and saying that they feel that, God is calling me to go into more of a political place. Never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be in this place, but obedience is where I feel like I'm supposed to be. And God has continued to kind of guide me in the direction he wants me to go. So with that, I've loved being on the council. I've loved learning about city government. I'm learning a lot in school about city government. And so, that was something I was elected to, and it's an obligation that I feel like I need to take seriously, obviously. And so being well-informed and understanding how all of that works and making the right decisions. I do interact with the community quite a bit and talk to a lot of residents. How do you feel about this thing coming up on the agenda, and getting feedback from them? Because that's, I think, a big part of it is them feeling heard, seen, and valued. And so if that's not the priority that we govern with, then we need to look at how we govern. It's for the people. We want to make their lives easier. We want to provide amenities that give them the ability to stay within our community and enjoy it. So I've enjoyed learning a lot. We've got some issues going on right now with our water and sewer, and so that's kind of given us some challenge. But there is so much good in our community, and I choose to focus on that.
So I remember the first time I spoke with you and learned about all the things that you're doing afterwards. I was like, man, I need to step up my game a little bit. So you definitely, have a lot on your plate, and you're accomplishing a lot of good. Now, is there, you've been gracious to open up about your life and your challenges and your successes. Is there something that we haven't touched on that is important to who you are, that has really shaped you as a person?
Yeah, and I do want to add that I opened my private practice in counseling in Centerton. I worked in Bentonville in a group practice for about a year and a half until I went and got my license, and I'm a licensed associate counselor in Arkansas. And the traffic alone helped me make that decision to open a business in Centerton. And I rent from a chiropractor just a few blocks from my house, which has made all of this a lot more easier to manage my schedule. One of the things that really stands out for me is we all have choices on where we spend our time. I choose to spend my time in serving others. And this is not a personal, like, look at me, I want to be the spotlight, I'm great. It's not about me. It's about choosing to give back to the community that gave to me, but then also giving to people who deserve someone to show them that they have value. And, through Centerton Cares, through the Centerton Seniors, through my role with City Council, across the room from a client who's going through a really difficult time, if I could just be just a little glimmer of hope to any of those people, then I feel like I've lived a good life. My kids, I've got my husband and I have 6 kids between us. We have a grandbaby coming in September. His daughter's pregnant, and
That's exciting. That'll be your first?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's my first. Yeah. So, and I'm sure there's more to come from that. But, my youngest is 17. And so soon he will be graduating next year from Bentonville West. All 3 of my kids went through West. And, it's good that that we have the ability to kind of manage our schedules in a way. And that's why it's been great, because I see clients Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then, the senior center Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that kind of gives me a break in the week. And they've been a respite for me. I think we talked about that earlier as well. You have to find time for self-care. You have to find time for yourself. And I've made some really great friends and relationships, both on the Christian side and even people within the community that we may not connect in that spiritual side. but we definitely connect. We may not see things politically. And that's one of the greatest things about being involved in the community is I can sit across from someone who does not agree with me, and we don't even have to talk about it, but I have a great friendship with them. And that is what's important, is to be able to communicate and to have connection with others. And we were created for that. So to touch on that, I feel like, opening up Evergreen Christian Counseling was definitely a leap of faith in a sense. It's not always well received. And so being bold in that, I've been bold in other ways. I've run for a mayor of a city and not having, any time on council or anything. And so, but now, I guess my future is really in the hands of God and where he's directing me. I've been asked again to run for mayor again, and I've not made a decision at this point, but, I, just like with anything, I go into it with my whole heart and I give it my best and I'm always work in progress. So there's opportunities to learn and grow. And, if I can inspire one person, then I feel like I've made an impact. So
let's close with this last question. Of course, the name of the podcast is The Good Influencers. What does it mean to you to have a good influence?
I can only think of like our kids growing up right now, and they need good, solid people in their life that they can look up to. And to be a good influence is someone who has a good character, someone who's caring, someone who has dreams and aspirations, and who doesn't sit on the couch, gets up and pushes towards those. And for many years, I didn't do that. I was held back by my own insecurities. Today, I celebrated 1 year from having weight loss surgery. I lost 123 pounds. And I got my body back. I got my life back. I got energy back. And I woke up this morning with another opportunity to make a difference. And so just like, I've shared with some of my clients, what is it that inspires you? What are things you want to do in your life? What kind of person do you want to be? And for me, I want to be someone who people can see good in, people can be inspired by, people that can be motivated to go after what they want. I do credit my education. There is some back and forth on whether education is important to me, and it changed me. It gave me something that no one could take away from me. And so, so far I have all A's in my classes, so that's a good thing.
Good for you.
And I don't do that to brag, but to balance what I balance and still being able to do well in school. It speaks to things that I probably would never have seen in myself had I not been challenged. And that's the great thing, is the adversity is what grows us. So even though we're sometimes in the darkest places, I think about a seed. The seed is planted in a soil that's dark and it needs water. It needs a firm foundation. And in order for that seed to turn into anything, you have to water it. You have to help it grow. And it faces adversity from the start. And so to me, I just continue to try to plant seeds and try to, build relationships and connections with others. And it's, I don't take credit for any of it. I give it to God and the people around me to support what I do.
Well, Wendy, I really appreciate it. I love your story. I love your energy, your dedication. My hope is people will hear this, and that glimmer of hope you're talking about is someone will get that glimmer of hope from your story. So thank you.
Well, thank you for what you do as well.